Outbound Eisenhower 1 hour, post office 2390. Stevenson 50 out to 355 from DuSable Lakeshore Drive, and 30 minutes outbound Orion slowing down in the Express 43rd out to Marquette. Ooh, it looks like the outbound 4 just shut down due to a car fire between 111th and 115th. DuSable Lakeshore Drive is busy either way in the tri-state accident northbound at the spur. This report is a service of Salem Surround, a local digital marketing agency providing high-performing digital solutions. To surround your target audience, go to surroundchicago.com today. From the AM 560 Traffic Center, I'm Jill Urchek.
Now, your official weather forecast from the Air Right Heating and Cooling Weather Center.
Tonight will be clear to partly cloudy and humid with a low of 64. On Saturday, expect partly sunny skies with a chance of a thunderstorm in some areas during the afternoon, reaching a high of 81. Saturday night will be clear with a low of 61. Sunday is forecasted to be mostly sunny and pleasant with a high of 77. I'm meteorologist Jason Caterina on AM 560, The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from The Signature, a division of Esquire Bank Studios.
This hour of The Shaun Thompson Show is sponsored exclusively by DonleyAuctions.com. They need your guns. Sell for top dollar. DonleyAuctions.com.
I love America. I love the Constitution. I love the First Amendment. I want to carry and all else. I love property. And let me tell you something. If you care about your country, read Ludwig von Mises and the 6 lessons of the Austrian Economic School, motherfuckers.
From the streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc, he's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Shaun Thompson. And this is the Shaun Thompson Show.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag.
I personally think this is the most exciting time in a generation, 3 generations to be alive. This is when we are going to make a decision. Are we going to be a country of principles, of integrity of law, or are we going to be a Soviet state? It's really that simple to me. So when I look for news, I look for people who understand what's at stake and understand what side to be on. My next guest is one of those reporters working for an incredible outlet started by somebody who understands Chinese communism. She only hires the best. That's my next guest, who has been an investigative reporter reporting on everything from national politics, aerospace, aviation, and so much more in the news at the Epoch Times. Jacob Burg, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, you've been on a couple of interesting topics that I wanted to go over. And I think I want to start with the AI one, if that's all right with you.
Yeah,
Because
by all means.
You had written a very interesting piece, a provocative piece. If they were human, they would be arrested. And what you meant by this is AI was released or not released and managed to go into areas of our government and information it was not supposed to go into, correct?
Yeah. It I can jump into it if you'd like.
Please.
It's a really concerning situation. According to a range of different people I've talked to, everybody from data scientists who actually work with AI and understand the science behind the technology, all the way up to people who are kind of concerned about policy and thinking about what needs to happen from like a regulatory or legislative standpoint. And the general idea of what happened, just to kind of keep it, in a more simple sense, I guess, is basically they were doing a test and they wanted the model they wanted to see how sophisticated the model could respond basically in a cybersecurity, type of evaluation with the highest capabilities the tech has. So what that means is they're going to relax some of the safety protocols they would normally have because they want to see how far the model's willing to go. And the gist of it is that they thought the model didn't have access to the internet. They thought that they had enough safeguards in place to prevent that. And what happened is the model reasoned that, okay, I've got this test I've got to solve. I've got to find the answers to the questions. And the easiest way I can do that is to get onto the internet and then basically hack into this other company, which is called Hugging Face, and they're like a platform with a bunch of different AI models on there. And that was, the models that OpenAI were testing reasoned that that's where they could get the answers. And back to the title, if they'd be human, they'd be arrested. Somebody I was interviewing for the story said that to me. He was like, this is literally the first time a AI was able to do a fully autonomous cyber attack without being instructed by humans. And, he basically said, he's like, if this was a hacker, a human hacker, they would probably be put in jail.
So I'm going to tell you how I like this. All right. And I know it's a different twist, but I'm going to tell you why I like it. We have lived, you and I, in a world where we have had treason represented in Congress, in the Senate, and in the White House. And when you look at what this computer was able to do because you asked it a question, it was asked a question. It was able to solve, even though we didn't like how it did it, it was able to solve the question that was asked, correct?
Yeah.
So I say this to you because before you came on, the hour before, we have the story about Eric Swalwell, who was stooping the Chinese spy Fang Fang and lying about it. We know through our years of what we've lived through, everything from COVID, the vaccine, the Biden election, so many of these other bills that have been passed and promised to lower rates and deliver health care, none of them did any of that. I would feel far more comfortable with a computer that is insatiable in its quest to get the correct answer than I would a Democrat from California. What do you think, Jacob?
That question goes far beyond my purview as a reporter, to be completely honest with you. And I don't have a comment on the Democratic Party or any of their elected officials. But what I will say is that, we're reaching a point with AI technology where it's starting to get intelligent enough that it's able to do things that people are not foreseeing. And that are not, being planned out by the developers who are running these tests. And, it's getting to a point now where this technology is getting so advanced that a lot of the people I've spoken to are concerned. To your point about China, there's been talks about putting, just as an example, like the electrical grid, various aspects of U.S. infrastructure on automated, making these things automated. In other words, it means hooking them up to some kind of digital grid in terms of how they can be controlled, whether they can be turned on or turned off. And a lot of people are concerned if AI is able to do what they call an agentic attack without being instructed to. What can the technology do to us? Here at home in the United States? If it's being wielded, like our tech itself being hacked into or being wielded by a foreign adversary, maybe even China, maybe Russia, maybe Iran, maybe some other country. And so, I think there's a lot of concern with this insofar as how foreign adversaries could play into it for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting topic because for the point of if you're searching for the correct answer, the correct outcome, the correct math equation. And I say this to you only because I've used it, but I'm a generation older than you. You are a young whippersnapper, so I'm assuming you and your generation, have you used all of these Chat GBTs and Claude and and Grok? Have you used them?
I've used Claude occasionally for research purposes, but interestingly enough, I've seen a lot of people use these tools and not really. How do I say this? It's like they assume that the answers that they're getting are basically infallible. And, just to your point,
yes,
and to your question, it's like I was asking Claude a really simple question the other day, doing some research to find sources, just quickens the process. It made a very bold mistake. It was something really easy. And then I saw Google Gemini do it on another question. I was trying to find original sources for old documents going back to the 90s for like agricultural stuff, really boring things, but they got it wrong. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people in my generation who are coming up. I mean, hell, there's people younger than me who are growing up with this stuff. And then honestly, I've seen people my parents' age and older who are using it so much that, you know, for simple, basic, everyday things. I've even heard some elected officials, older people, you know, both parties who have conversations with these tools like for hours for hours a day. And so, yeah, there's a lot to be concerned about.
Well, there is, but, you know, like you said, it's a tool, right? So is a hammer. Hammer can build a house or it can kill somebody. It's always who's going to be wielding it. So I think it's an interesting time to see how it turns out, who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, how you want to use it. And then if we could apply it to some of the promises we've been told in this ridiculous culture where we are throwing money, good money after bad money. I more want to release it on some of the entitlement programs that waste our money. But one of the interesting topics you wrote about that I think is connected is the flock camera story. And I must have, Jacob, 5 clips on the board from Missouri to Georgia to Rhode Island to New York where policemen are using the flock cameras and getting arrested because they're looking at their girlfriends, they're looking at their wives, they're looking at their bookie. So we've got a real issue where a lot of things are coming online, possibly at the same time. And I would be more concerned, myself, more concerned about the flock cameras, because if that gets automated or if it's already shown a history of abuse. I mean, I don't think these flock cameras are coming out to be what they're sold. I think it's something that we really need to stand united against. How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, literally today, that was what I was doing, was taking photos of flock cameras for a story that should be coming out either next week or the week after. And actually, unfortunately, they are already automated. And that's part of what makes them scary for a lot of people. They use AI. So, like, you know, in a general sense, what makes a flock camera different than a traditional security camera or even a traditional license plate reader is that it's taking all of that video and audio data, because it's not just video, it's not just still images, it's listening. A lot of them have the capacity to listen, and it's taking all that data, it's storing it. Usually somewhere that Flock has control of this. You know, we don't have a lot of time to get into those details, but the point is that a lot of people have said to me that they see it as a Fourth Amendment violation because it's taking this basically data of property owned by Americans, storing it where it can be indexed, where it can be cataloged, and where, you know, they claim now that it's going to be deleted, you know, in 7 days, but there's a chance they might be storing it, you know, somewhere so that in case they ever had a warrant, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty over like whether or not they're fully deleting everything. But back to your original point, yeah, there's been a growing number of cases. I think there was one close to where I live in Florida of cops who have been charged with allegedly using these cameras to spy on it. Some of the cases I saw, like you said, were potentially romantic interests. But the bigger concern is that, you know, these cameras, a lot of people are like, oh, they're just cameras. No, they're cameras that are always on, always listening, always watching, and they're using AI to make decisions about whether or not, hey, maybe like they might use AI to do a face match when they see you in the image. They'll use it to do a vehicle match. They'll use AI to make a decision as to whether or not there might be a threat. And so it kind of marries the two technologies together. And then back to my point about, you know, a foreign adversary hacking, I've had multiple people in the data science industry, you know, data scientists themselves who told me, they're like, look, I'm really afraid of a foreign adversary hacking Flock and using it to, like, imagine spying on like U.S. senators of either party, you know, like going into businesses that might be like something they could use as blackmail, or, you know, going in and getting alcohol, or, you know, maybe using, you know, a drug that's legal in one state, not legal in another. And so it can get really, this can snowball potentially. And yeah, I know you're right to bring it up as a concern. And, you know, I've talked to a lot of people who are worried about where this could go.
Well, the other thing, too, is to create the scandal. You know, when you have this technology, you can not just expose a scandal, you can also create a scandal. That's the other side that not enough people talk about. AI can also be used to create images, to create even face scans. And how hard would it be to create a car or a license plate on a flock camera track that doesn't exist? I said when we were talking about it a couple days ago, to me, it's a dirty cop that can never be fired. You know, when you live in the real world, oftentimes the people who are the authority are the worst people in our society. So what's to say it cannot be used for blackmail, even though you didn't do it? If a senator didn't do it, you could put a camera going to a nefarious place or a nefarious activity. So to me, this is, once again, it goes down to who's in control of our government, as I see it. Everything to me is about that. And we've lived through some times where, you know, we had a president that was elected allegedly for 4 years whose son had a laptop the FBI sat on for 18 months before an election that to me was evidence of treason. And I don't want to turn any more power over to these people. In fact, I want to limit their power. But I'm wondering if technology is eliminating my option or our option as a society to govern the power of government. This is once again one of those things where you're going to wake up, it's going to make the Minority Report look like an appetizer, because we've got, you just said it, Florida, Georgia, California, Rhode Island, New York. These are law enforcement officers that are misusing it to spy on girlfriends. So they tell us, why couldn't they use it to create a case against somebody who is a reporter for the Epoch Times?
Yeah, it's scary stuff to think about, and it doesn't even have to be public people like myself or politicians. I mean, you know, a lot of these, in addition to the cops that have been charged with, you know, using these cameras and exploiting them, I'm sure and if you haven't, your listeners should look into it. There's a number of cases now that have been reported, I mean, more than a dozen, of innocent people who've been pulled over, and sometimes at gunpoint, because a flock camera gave a misread, a mismatch. It mistakenly identified, or it thought that somebody's car matched a license plate of like a criminal suspect that the police were looking for. And so they were running it through Flock, and they thought they got a match, and then they pull over the car. And I mean, I've heard of one person, I think a younger guy, if I'm not mistaken, was in jail for like 2 or 3 days at least, while they figured out what was going on and what the truth was. I mean, imagine that, like literally somebody who is just a normal American who's just going about their life. They're never, ever going to be a public figure, never even think about that type of implication, and now they could be, you know, at the mercy of this too, victimized by it. And so that's something I think a lot of people should probably think about, you know, because obviously, yeah, there's, you know, me, I'm standing in front of the camera, holding my own camera, taking a photo of it, and I'm, you know, a public figure, but I imagine there's going to be, you know, even more people than we've already seen who just are going to get caught, you know, in the crosshairs of all of this technology.
Now, you also have been tackling some of the rise of the, as I call them, the repulsives. Some call them the Democrat Socialists of America. This is something I find very interesting. They're selling it, or it's been sold as kind of a riff in the Democrat Party. When you're from Chicago, I personally have never been able to tell the difference between a socialist, a Marxist, a communist, or a Chicago Democrat. How much of this is a lot of sizzle versus a lot of stake in the story that people should be concerned? I can't think of policies that are more socialist than Obamacare or the response for COVID or the bailout, the Inflation Reduction Act. Is this something that is really a shock to the American system, or is it just the correct branding of what we've already been dealing with?
I memean, ironically, you know, the recent thing that Trump announced with the importing, you know, beef and then selling it at 25% discount struck me as slightly socialist when I saw that this week. But not to get off topic here. I bring it up because it gets to my point of how I want to address that question. And it's, you know, I've looked at a lot of the various candidates who've run under this banner. Obviously, you know, you've got the national platform that the DSA puts out, and then you've got individual candidates who have their own positions. And it's similar. I'm not going to say it's the same thing as existing political parties, but, you know, you see the same thing in the Republican Party, where there'll be national platform positions and then a massive divergence when you actually get into individual politicians. And now with DSA, it's interesting because it's like went to a fairly a left-leaning college and, was around a lot of people within that wider umbrella, I guess you could call it. And I mean, this is backed up even. I've looked at some of because there's apparently data out online where the individual chapters of the DSA, even the national, and then like the New York and probably the Chicago probably has their own data on this. And because they have like different, not constituencies, but they have different like wings and camps within their bigger like umbrella. And
Yes.
my impression, and this is literally based on dozens, if not hundreds of conversations I've had over the last like 15 to 20 years, you have, when people define themselves as that, you have everything from people who look at like Northern European capitalism, where it's basically, you've got a free market, but you've got, maybe a lot more regulations than the United States has or would have, and then maybe a lot of programs that might exist in a truly socialist country, but otherwise there's a free market and there's some kind of hybrid thing going on, but it's still capitalism. I feel like there's a lot more people who are like that, but maybe they think that's socialism. Now, granted, I'm genuinely, there are people who within the DSA specifically, and then even outside of the DSA, who will use that that label socialist, and they are from a Marxist persuasion of some kind, and Marxism's a big umbrella too. But yeah, it's very much like, to get to your core question, I think there's a lot more hype put to that like big kind of scary kind of boogeyman thing than there might be in reality. These, like, realistically, like, I feel like a lot of these candidates are winning in obviously the movement's growing, but there's also a unique political moment right now that like is kind of advantageous to a lot of Democratic politicians who are running. So like they're running in an environment where they're probably going to do better than they would have obviously 2 years ago, and then probably way better than even in 2018. But like, and so that leads to some candidates who are more left wing that are benefiting from this national moment and winning these primaries. Now, are we going to see this spread out of blue cities, blue states, or whatever? It's a big question. It was like with Wisconsin. I was waiting to see how that primary was going to go. Now, it was really close, but at the same time, Hong lost, the DSA candidate. She lost, like I said, it was close, but her opponent that she lost to, David Crowley, he had dropped out of the race previously, and I think he's just gotten back into the race. Like, so even though it was so close, like, to lose like that to a candidate that had literally just gotten back into the race doesn't necessarily look great for a national moment. And then, of course, in Michigan, you've got a candidate who, might have some shared resources with the DSA, but it's, he doesn't really define himself as that. So that one will be more of a question of like progressivism against, versus the establishment Democratic Party. But we're just going to have to see. I mean, I would have to revisit this question after November and see, and then maybe even in 2028, who gets the nomination for the Democratic Party for president. Well, that's going to be a big.
We will have you back we will have you back to discuss that. I'm up against the clock, but I want you to know, you're talking to the guy right now who single-handedly submerged Mao Zedong, as I called her, for weeks before the election. And I think I did my job. Mao Zedong lost, and I'm taking full credit for it. So feel free to write that in the epochtimes.com, will you?
I'll consider it, I guess.
Thank you. Jacob Burg, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for making time for me. I know how busy you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back with your calls and comments.
He believes in freedom, capitalism, and individual liberty. And because of that,
He's become an enemy of the state.
he's Shaun Thompson. And this is The Shaun Thompson Show on AM 560. The Answer.
This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Abdul El